Welcome back to Mr. Orth's Flipped Classroom for Grammar, looking now at the different types of sentences, beginning with simple and compound sentences. This is a graphic you're going to want to add to your notes. I strongly encourage you to go ahead and actually leave space at the bottom for additional lines to be added. You might even want to leave some space in between in case you want to write an example of each in the middle of this graphic. The items in purple are going to be errors that can be determined or discerned based on sentence structure and knowledge of clauses. The ones on the bottom in black text are going to be actual correct sentence types. A fragment. Most oftentimes a fragment is actually not necessarily missing a part of a sentence like a subject or a verb, but most commonly it's a dependent clause written by itself without connecting to any kind of independent clause. It's reasons like this that you were taught that you can't start a sentence with the word because. At that time, your teacher was not going to get into different types of clauses and complex sentences. Because I said so, period, might be an answer you hear quite a bit from an adult or two. However, it's still a fragment. A run-on is also an error type. A run-on typically is going to have two or more independent clauses, but typically there's going to be no punctuation or no conjunction between those two. Please note over here in the syntax formula, the DC is going to refer to a dependent clause. IC is independent clause. The punctuation is the actual punctuation in there, and when it's relevant, on this column only, a plus sign indicates a coordinating conjunction, the most common of which is and. In these columns here, the plus sign indicates or more, in this case two or more independent clauses without any kind of punctuation or conjunction between the two, usually a run-on. You can have dependent clauses in a run-on, but typically the problem starts with not having any kind of conjunction or punctuation. A comma splice is actually a type of run-on, and as you can see by the syntax formula, it looks very similar. The key is there's a comma between them, but no conjunction, which doesn't work. It's still considered a type of run-on. A simple sentence is going to be one independent clause, no dependent clauses, that's it. Independent clause, period. A compound sentence has two main forms that it takes. Again, it's two independent clauses, so it's either going to be independent clause, comma, coordinating conjunction such as and then independent clause, period, or it might be independent clause, semicolon, independent clause. For a number of you, we're going to have a table looking at colons and semicolons until we tackle chapter 11, punctuation. Feel free to pause the video if you need more time in order to write down the rest of this graphic. Punctuating sentence types. How do we do this? First, you find each clause. Start by finding the verbs, then subjects, and finally conjunctions, both coordinating and subordinating. Remember to put a comma before the coordinating conjunction or fanboys in a compound sentence, but only before the and in a compound sentence. Do not put a comma before coordinating conjunctions if there's only a compound predicate, which lacks its own subject, or compound verb. There's still simple sentences unless you have subject verb, comma, fanboys, subject verb. Let's look at some examples here. Start by finding the verbs, simple subjects, and coordinating conjunctions before you conclude which type of sentence is below. Do not simply look at the length of a sentence to decide which type of sentence it is for anything in this chapter. I sat in the waiting room and typed on my computer. All right, verbs. We have sat and we have typed. Simple subjects. I sat. All right. Who typed? I typed. Except I is all the way over here again. That means only one simple subject. If there's only one subject, we can only have one clause, which is why there's no comma here. If I sat in the waiting room, comma, and I typed on my computer, then we'd have a different kind of sentence. It's just independent clause with a compound predicate. Verb, extra words, fanboys, verb, extra words. Second example. Wishing for a warmer day, I slowly sipped a cup of chai tea, but my cat was content to curl up for a nap. All right, looking at verbs. Wishing might be a verb. Sipped was. Curl, question mark, are those verbs? Well, one at a time. Wishing, ing. Ing needs a helping verb in front of it. Do you see it? Nope, first word in a sentence. Therefore, it's something else. It's either a gerund or a participial phrase. Either way, we're not going to worry about it because all we're doing is finding verbs. This is not a clause. Sipped. Who sipped? I sipped. Alright, we have a clause here. If you look at it, there's a comma in front of it and nothing else there going on. So we know that's going to be an independent clause. I slowly sipped a cup of chai tea. Alright, we have tea here. That's where the phrase ends. Was linking verb, content. Is content something you can do? Not really. So it looks like we have a linking verb and then we have a predicate adjective. What was content? Cat. Simple subject. Cat was content. Alright, we have fanboys in front of it. And looks like we have another independent clause with fanboys. Curl. Is curl the verb in the sentence? Nope. We have to in front of it. To curl. That's an infinitive, so we'll not count that. Bonus question. Can you figure out, if you wanted to, what punctuation you could add in the sentence? We said we have a phrase followed by a comma, which we're going to ignore. And then we have independent clause, fanboys, independent clause. You're right, it's a comma, but where should it go? Good. Before the fanboys, before the word but, before the independent clause begins. Go back to the previous slide. You'll see that it's independent clause, comma, fanboys, independent clause. Good job. Now, when you're doing the practice, I really strongly encourage you to make sure that you actually write on the syntax formula. I see independent clause, comma, fanboys, independent clause. Do that for each sentence, then identify the sentence types. Actually convert it so it looks like the table before you just guess and hope. Trust me, it gets more complicated after this lesson, so get off to a strong start by really knowing what you're doing. Good hunting.